So we're here at a university that's going all in on something cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary. Tell us a little bit about your impressions of that and your experiences of working like that, because you're not the typical law guy who's completely to your subject. You've also been working cross-disciplinary a lot.
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is it's in a castle. I think that's it. I mean, I took a picture of the castle, I tweeted it, I said, take that Berkman, which is the first of these institutes. So I'm very proud to be part of the launch of the Castle Internet Institute, which is really, really critical.
That is indeed a very important thing. Your work started in law, but your honorary doctorate is actually in sociology of law, and you're also, in very many ways, considered a tech guy. Why do we need each other in the academic world like that? Why do we need to work like this? Why is this the modern way to do it?
So the thing about American lawyers is that we don't believe there's anything called law or legal reasoning. We are kind of, as Roberto Unger puts it, we are priests who have lost our faith but keep our jobs.
We have plenty of that. You're talking about the Swedish church right there.
So what that means is that we're hungry, desperate for insights from other disciplines, economics, technology, sociology, and that makes it a natural ground for the kind of analysis which gave birth to the law of cyberspace. And that is an approach that says we need to understand the way in which the internet's going to interact with society through every lens that society has for understanding itself. And if any discipline says, I don't need to understand something else, that discipline needs to be re-educated about the essential openness that this conversation requires. Thank you. At least one agrees with me. It's very important. So we have. I first did my work at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society, and then took the same ideas to Stanford. And the constant objective has been to find a way to facilitate exactly what Stefan described as a platform for different disciplines to learn to communicate. Early on, I taught a course with Hal Abelson at MIT, where we had half of the students as lawyers and half of the students as MIT students, and forced them to sit in the same room together. It was a little difficult. We had some umpires and referees to make sure that the fights didn't break out too frequently. But they had to learn to talk to each other, and it was extremely difficult, but essential, because by the end, each side could begin to understand the strengths and weakness of the other side and begin to complement it. And I think that's exactly what has to happen here.
So you have also become a political figure in many ways, in the sense of being a co-founder of Creative Commons. One of the biggest political and internet-related issues is the issues of copyright and Creative Commons as it's developed. How did you at all end up there? What made you take on Hollywood? That's not exactly a small fight to pick.
Yeah, so as I described when I was before the faculty today, I actually got into this field because I thought nobody else would care anything about it, and I could write things that nobody would read, because I was really kind of shy starting out as an academic, and I wanted to be able to have the freedom to write without worrying about what other people would, see as wrong or not like. And very quickly, of course, the field took off, and I became an activist when I saw the harm which lawyers were doing in the space of this technological development. The moment for me was when Congress passed a statute called the Sonny Bono Copyright Term Extension Act, which extended the term of existing copyrights by 20 years, further burdening culture that otherwise should be free under copyright restrictions we couldn't even begin to clear because we couldn't even identify who the owners of these works were. Completely senseless regulation, which made no sense against the background of simple reasoning or against the background of American law. So it seemed to me that this was a perfect fight to take up, to challenge this. And I had this extremely naive view. We would run into the United States Supreme Court, get them to listen to the arguments about why this statute was unconstitutional. They would swipe it down, and we would free the internet for all sorts of great free culture-like innovation. Of course, the Supreme Court taught me exactly how naive I was when 7-2 they upheld this regulation, and it was clear it was going to take a much bigger political fight to eventually win in this space than just going to get a bunch of judges to agree with us. And that's what really gave birth to Creative Commons. We recognition that we had to bring ordinary people into this fight and make them understand what was at stake and give them simple ways to understand it, and that was our objective.
And to help us out, when was this in time when the Supreme Court did this? So
the statute was passed in 1998. We filed the suit in 1999. The Supreme Court heard the arguments in 2002. In 2003, I'm sorry, 2001, and then in 2002 they ruled against us. Creative Commons was born in 2002.
Right. A lot of people, I think, tend to believe that you're completely against all form of copyright, but that's not true, I understood from talking to you before. We have an interesting case right now in Sweden, actually right here in the very south. There's a right-wing political madman, Carl P. Herslov, you know him, who has stolen a text about circumcision of children and published it, you know, to go really hard on Muslims. And this text was written for educational purposes by a completely different organization. Now they're suing him. In a world without copyright, they couldn't do that. So they're using their copyright for something really good. You're not against that kind of copyright, are you?
No. I mean, I fundamentally believe copyright is an essential part of a digital economy, as much as it's a part of, it was a part of the analog economy. But the question isn't whether we need copyright. The question is, what's the architecture of the copyright that makes sense in a digital economy? Now, in the old days, all copyright had to worry about, and this is a big challenge, but all it had to worry about was creating the right incentives to give authors and creators the independence that they need to create and to be able to earn enough from their creativity to be creators. That's an important objective. But in the digital age, it's got to do two things. It's got to do that, and it's also got to assure the freedoms that science and culture and amateur creativity rely upon to be able to build upon and share and spread works that aren't burdened or necessarily tied up by this kind of copyright. That's two things it needs to do. Protect the amateur, give the amateur the freedom, and also protect the professional to give them the kind of return they need. The point about the existing copyright system is it does neither of those two things well. It doesn't give artists the money artists need, you know, as people share work against the law. It's the artist is not getting any of the money from that. And it's not encouraging innovation among business because of the great copyright overhang. Nobody knows quite what the law regulates and how it regulates. So there's been great work demonstrating a kind of black hole of innovation around copyright technologies. And of course, it's not helping the young generation which are using these technologies, because what we do is call them criminals as they use technologies in the way it seems natural for them to use technologies. The only people who have benefited from the existing system are the lawyers who have been suing people who have been violating the rules. Now, I make lawyers for a living, so I'm not against the idea of lawyers existing or doing their work, but it seems to me this structure, this way of regulating, is not making sense of the technology and the needs of copyright. And so the simple, completely obvious point that it's astonishing to me it's taken so long to get, you know, most people to the place of recognizing. The simple point is we need to update the system, to update the law in light of the technology, to do the things copyright needs to do. And the way to do that is not to turn to the 19th century or 20th century businesses and ask them what's the best copyright regime. The way to do that is to begin to think about what the future of creativity will look like and what kind of protections that will require. And that's what I was trying to push in my work around copyright.
But then you changed pattern too. You changed where you were going and decided to take on something even more challenging and difficult than Hollywood, the U.S. Congress, and basically the entire political system. How's that going so far?
Yeah. Okay, that was not fair.
No, but you picked the fight, right? So.
Yeah, so 6 years ago at an international conference that Creative Commons had launched, you know, I mean, two things happened. Number one, I recognized that there was an extraordinary range of young people in this business who were doing really great work. And I decided that I thought an academic should throw away all of his or her intellectual capital every 10 years and start again. So that was about my 10-year anniversary in that field. And I also recognized, the second point, was that though we were making enormous progress among parents and educators and businesses and among the general public in getting them to recognize why this needed to be updated or changed, we were making no progress among at least American politicians. They didn't even understand there were two issues, two sides to the question. They just understood one side, and that side was the side being pushed by Hollywood. And it struck me that we were not going to make any progress on this issue until we made progress on the more fundamental issue, this fundamental corruption that defines, I think, the way American government functions. But I think more importantly, it was to see that it's not just the relatively esoteric questions of copyright where that was true in the American government. The problem with the American government today is that absolutely every single important issue, the American government will not be capable of making a sensible judgment about that, given the current state of the way our system has been corrupted. So issues that affect us alone and issues that affect the rest of the world. I mean, take climate change as the one most obvious example. The United States Congress will never pass climate change legislation that addresses this problem in any sensible way until we address this underlying corruption. It just will not happen. So, you know, I thought, what was tenure for? I mean, here's my chance to try to work on a problem, a really hard problem, but a problem I thought was essential, and I couldn't be fired for it, so that's what I did. I gave up the work at IP, and I shifted to work on this problem, and it's only been 6 years. I mean, it's going to take at least...
You get another 4 before
I have
you have
4
to change
years to fix it, right. So by 2017, it has to be fixed. We'll
okay,
see.
well, we'll follow that closely. Look, going back to the internet issues, since, you know, these people are like that, when we talk about reform, when we talk about the big changes that need to be done, what's broken on the internet today? Aside copyright, what else is broken? What do we need to fix? What do we need to build?
Well, I mean, Stefan referred to the talk that I made today, and I was talking about the recognition of the bad, you know, the bads that are happening on the internet. I think we have to recognize that there's a real risk to the resiliency and security of the system. And that was in some sense baked into the original design of the internet because they didn't think about the security and identity issues when they built the original internet. They looked at their buddies who they knew would be using it, and they thought, why, I can trust you, why should I worry about any of these issues? They weren't thinking about this network taking off and being literally ubiquitous in every single facet of social life. So we have a real problem in thinking about how to address security and privacy in a way that doesn't destroy the internet. And my great fear is that governments are not really eager to solve this problem in a way that protects the essential architecture of the internet. They would like to solve this problem by basically breaking the internet and returning a network that they can control or they have much greater control over. And so if they don't want to push in the direction of a sensible solution to this problem of security and privacy and resiliency, it's really urgent that we figure out institutes like this, figure out what the right structure is, and begin to educate and push for that, so that we can avoid the ultimate and certain calamities that are going to happen when either criminals or internet terrorist types begin to deploy the obvious technologies they've developed to destabilize the value of the internet.
So we're going to need lawyers, we're going to need engineers, we're going to need the economists, we're going to need the political scientists, we're going to need to work cross-disciplinary.
They have to work together, right? If any of these people address the problem on their own, they're going to come up with the wrong answer. But if you force them to sit in a castle and give them good food, which I'm sure we're going to get soon, and tell them that they need to figure this thing out in a way that respects the best the best of each of these complementing disciplines, I think the answer, we can hack that answer. But then the really hard problem is to figure out how to take that answer and make it actually policy in governments. Now, some governments it's easier than others, But again, that's why I've turned to the other issue that I've turned to, because even if you came up with the best possible solution here, I guarantee you all the money in the world will be aligned against that becoming government policy, because there are people who benefit from the existing state of insecurity and lack of privacy inside the network.
You mentioned food, so final question. Are you hungry?
Teo is hungry. That's
Teo's
what I
hungry.
know.
I'm hungry too. Let's eat. And a warm hand for Lawrence
Great,
Lessig,
thank you.
ladies and gentlemen.